Hello everyone, I'm Charna Davis-Wiese. Welcome to UCF Profiles. Abused women around the world, same problem but maybe different solutions. Join me and welcome Dr. Leandra Preston, who has just returned from a trip to Ghana. We're going to talk about the problems there in Ghana and then come back here at home and also talk about a new program that you are going to help spearhead that is so cool. You're going to want to hear about this.
Thank you very much.
So when you went there, you probably expected that life for women is not what it is here.
Yes.
So was it worse? Was it better? Were there real surprises?
It was both, actually. In many ways it was better, and in many ways it was worse, but it mostly was different. And what we realized when we were there and we were talking about gender issues and teaching strategies to address gender issues, that we had to really talk about gender much differently than we talk about it here.
Because of their culture?
Yeah, because the way the culture is organized around different conceptions of gender than our culture. And that the roles are less fixed in some ways, and that you do see more gender crossover in jobs. You see more women in the job sector than you might see in more rural areas. Here you see more women.
When it's rural, almost it seems like the women have to. They must have to work. They're poor. They have to really put in a lot of the heavy lifting of the day-to-day family.
Yeah, they're in the field side by side with the men in ways that we don't see here. And it's not really, you know, a kind of a pay equity type of situation, because everybody works for the good of the community, and it's such a communal mindset that competition is different. The interaction between men and women is different. The family structure is central. That's the most important defining factor in Ghanaian culture, is the family. Women are very defined through childbearing.
How about the little girls? Are they different than the little boys?
Oh, it's so neat. The little girls, they really empower little girls early to become businesswomen in ways that we don't see here, much younger than we would see here. There is an informal program that one of our lecturers told us about, where they give young girls, maybe 5 years old, who work in the marketplace with their mothers, like 3 oranges, and say, okay, if you come back and you can produce a profit from these 3 oranges, then we'll give you more oranges, and then you can figure out a way to sell this and produce profit. And they do this. The girls are 5, 7 years old, and then develop these skills and eventually become market women. And the market women they have a lot of power in the marketplace, and that's really a woman-dominated space in Ghana. And it's also the primary space of commerce, which is different than here, because women don't dominate commerce in the States like they do in Ghana. But then in some ways, women are still subservient, don't have access to land. They might be in the fields working, but they don't own that land. They don't have legal access to land. There's absolutely no place for childless women, which creates problems for women who can't bear children.
So what happens to them?
Well,
they shunned, or?
Yeah, they are shunned in some spaces. In Ghana, it's really divided up by village and region, and each region is also divided up into villages.
So it all depends on where you're unlucky enough to be or lucky enough to be, I imagine.
In some villages, if a woman cannot bear children, she takes on a masculine role in the community, and she is basically takes on the persona of a man. It's very interesting. They really play with gender.
Also in terms of dress, or what she does?
Well, and mostly in what she does, and the role she plays in the community is like in the family. She would do things that typically men would do, and in some cases is revered in the same way that men are. It's very interesting. It's not a sexual kind of gender role reversal. It's more of
their roles in the family, their roles in the community. Well, I guess that in their culture, in their mind, if her role was to be a mother and a nurturer, and she couldn't do that, they had to find another position for her. It's like putting her in another job.
Well, that's where women are valued as mothers, and I would imagine in Africa, but I know in Ghana, I'm going to talk about specifically in West African culture, women are valued as mothers.
That would be nice.
I think in some ways it's nice if you, it creates problems because they have the same problems with fertility that we have here.
Right.
And so for women who can't conceive, and what's really problematic about it is the responsibility is on the woman. And so if she cannot conceive, then she's ostracized, but it could be a problem with the man.
Right, so it's made to be her fault no matter what.
No matter what.
That must be, I can't even imagine having to shoulder that besides being shunned and then taking the responsibility and the guilt and all the rest of it. So there are also problems with domestic abuse there. And in a culture where women are maybe not given the power, it must be even harder to deal with than it is in ours, where we have problems that we can't even enumerate.
Right. I think it's still more culturally accepted in Ghana, more so than it is here. I mean, here it's obviously still a tremendous problem. We acknowledge it more as a problem here than they do.
And condemn it.
Right. And I actually don't want to say that they don't acknowledge it as a problem, because now they have significant activity that's going on around the issue of domestic violence and rape. And this is in the more urban areas. In the rural areas, they're more removed from that kind of, assistance or education, access to language. I mean, they're really, the more rural, the greater problems with domestic violence and rape, and just a lack of education about issues of HIV and AIDS. There are some myths that if you rape a virgin, then it rids you of HIV, or that you're immune to HIV, and it's just really a lack of education around the issue, and it's
very hard to even get through to that or even begin to educate them if they don't want to be. And maybe they even like their ways. They like being having their own ideas and don't want to be told.
Well, it's just, that's all they know, and that's all that they've experienced. And I think it's similar to people who experience domestic violence as children and then perpetuate that cycle because they just haven't learned any other way. And, if it's not.
Is it like some of those cultures that if a woman is attacked, she's treated as she's the one who's punished because of it? In
some areas. I want to say the city of Accra, where we stay primarily, is much more advanced in that sense, that it's not publicly accepted for a woman to be abused. And I think if a woman was being battered publicly, somebody would intervene. But it's just different because it's more city. It's the population and education, and there's university there, and there are a lot of very well-educated women who have PhDs and who are professors and who do a lot of work. And there are actually a lot of men who are doing work in domestic violence over there who we worked with. That was really exciting.
Tell me about the program ARC.
ARC is foundations. It's a foundation for women's leadership and empowerment. It's a non-government organization. It's very small right now, who focuses on empowering women and working around issues of domestic violence and sexual assault for women and children.
I noticed on their website they had something, how you go on the website, you see all little boxes, and there's one that said tips and tricks, and it was just on the webpage that didn't necessarily mention what it was going to be about, and I thought, do you know what I'm talking about? And I click on tips and tricks, and it was what to do to keep yourself safe from violence. And that was really surprising to me.
And it's interesting because on the right side they have a couple poster links that they have these posters, and the way we present domestic violence here, if we have a poster, you're not going to see a woman being abused by the man, but there it's really explicit, and it's like a drawing, but they have a man holding a bat and a woman like this, and it's very explicit and in your face, and I think that strategy is probably necessary to really drive it home. And then the fact that they have a lot of men who are in leadership positions, not so much with ARC, but an organization that works with ARC, the Commission to End Domestic Violence in Ghana. They work closely with ARC, and they are led by men, and they go into the villages and talk to men about violence issues and educate women, and they actually will drive around in a van with a loudspeaker and go into villages and just talk about issues of domestic violence.
And it was amazing that on the website it talked about the list of things for you to do, and it said 1 out of every three women suffered some form of domestic violence at the hands of her partner, which was mind-boggling. And it's had things like survival tips, have a bag to pack, have all of this ready. It was, it struck me the way our websites have for hurricane survival tips.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
And went out to so much of the population that you really, it really was, on the one hand, frightening to think that's so needed. On the other hand, encouraging that there was the information for them, which was probably new for them.
Well, the Domestic Violence Act that they've just passed in 2007 this year. And it's a very progressive act for Ghana to pass around domestic violence. And it does include marital rape as illegal, which some states in the U.S. still have exemptions on. It includes sexual intercourse without informing your partner that you have HIV. That's considered against the act, what counts as domestic violence. The act is in 3 parts. The first part defines domestic violence. The second part sets out specific legislation and implications of domestic violence. And then the third part establishes a fund, a domestic violence victims fund, and includes money to build shelters and, assist victims in other ways.
You also worked with Planned Parenthood there.
Yeah, it was very interesting because we had a medical doctor come and speak to one of our classes, and she spoke quite a bit on the issue of abortion. And students, we really didn't know what to expect. I didn't really know what to expect in terms of the abortion issue, and what I assumed that it wouldn't be very well received, but because of the prevalence of rape, I wasn't sure. And so it was interesting to find out that in 1960 they passed an act that legalized abortion in Ghana. And it was under circumstances that were agreed upon by a woman and her doctor. And whether or not she wanted to have an abortion, if it was, the circumstances were such
But isn't it hard to find a doctor who will do it there?
Well, that's the problem, because the act sounds very progressive that this was passed in 1960, but doctors won't perform abortions. In most cases, not even in some cases, in most cases, doctors will not perform abortions because of moral issues, because it goes completely against the idea of community. And if a woman has an abortion, typically she will have a part of her uterus removed and will not be able to bear children. And so her role in the community is, null in some ways. So there are a lot of reasons they won't perform abortion, but it was very difficult to have a female doctor telling you about all the botched illegal abortions she sees coming in, and just telling us horror stories, and then saying that she is a doctor who has the ability and she refuses to perform them because of moral reasons. And if you don't have doctors perforing abortion, then
they're going to other people or doing something themselves.
And they do. They drink bleach. They will. It is. I think it mimics a lot of what we've seen in America, but it's extreme because the lack of education is more prevalent. So they're doing things that are killing young girls.
Oh my goodness. Well, we have so much more to talk about. We'll talk a little bit about some of the programs that you are going to start here to help victims of domestic abuse here. We'll be right back.
When JetBlue chose Orlando for its new flight training center, the presence of UCF strongly influenced their decision. The results? An investment of $160 million and 150 new jobs. UCF stands for opportunity.
Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Leandra Preston, who has just gotten back from Ghana and has seen progress and very terrible things and very wonderful things all at once happening there when it comes to women and domestic violence. And also, this is not something you just deal with overseas.
Right.
There's a lot of problems here, and you're very active in helping women of domestic violence here.
Yes.
In our area.
Yes, that's my primary issue of activism, is domestic violence. And in Brevard, we actually have a very supportive community. We have a domestic violence task force that includes all of the agencies, including the police agencies and the judicial system and the shelters who work in domestic violence. And we work together to try to find different strategies to address issues of domestic violence.
You know, we talked about it in Ghana, and maybe it's the way of their culture, the way it was. Maybe the women don't know how wrong it is, and I think that probably happens here as well. It becomes part of their life and what's normal for them.
Yes, it becomes normalized, and I think we normalize a lot of violence in our culture anyway, just by overexposure. And so what is unacceptable becomes acceptable in some people's eyes.
Were we had met once before. We've become friends now, and I remember you were telling me about the T-shirt program that you have done.
Yes.
Where women designed a T-shirt who have been a victim of domestic violence and put some kind of message on it, hung all over campus, wasn't it?
Right, and we do it. We'll do one in front of the courthouse in a couple weeks, actually. We do one every year in October. We do one every semester on campus.
And you were shocked at how many, weren't you?
Oh, yes. The first time I was involved with the project, we had 400 shirts, and you know, that's only the people who have made shirts who have had experiences with violence. And so you can imagine if you have 400 shirts from, well, this was in Central Florida, but we have a collection here now. We have over 150 shirts just from the local area of women who have made shirts.
And these are the women who knew about the program and took the time to do it.
Exactly, who were involved, so you can imagine.
It's probably a small percentage. And
it is a
you
small
said some
percentage.
of the messages were very heartbreaking.
Well, yeah, there's such a range of emotion in response to the experiences. Some, you know, from forgiveness to rage, and just really, really sad. They're very graphic a lot of times, but the function is to raise awareness about the prevalence of the issue, and I think it's very effective, especially when you do it in places like the courthouse where the legislation is going on. We're doing it in October because it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and they do a lot of legislation around domestic violence, or promote a lot of legislation around domestic violence, and so they are adopting a resolution around DV that we're going to storm the commission and have the Clothesline Project outside, and they are very supportive. So
let's talk about your new program that you're starting, and this was something that I never thought about, and it's the role that a pet has in domestic violence as a pawn, as a worry, as all of those things. I never really considered that an abuser would use an animal to get to their victim, whether it's a woman or a child.
Right. Well, and also the animal is generally also abused in a domestic violence house, whether it's child abuse or a spousal abuse. Some studies say 75% of abusive households include abuse of an animal or death of an animal. Women report that their abuser has killed or maimed their animal, and then of course they do use it as a pawn, as a control tactic, as a threat. It also keeps some women, that's the final barrier that keeps them from leaving their abusive situation, is not wanting to leave the pet behind, not wanting to see the animal hurt or killed. It's very serious. A lot of the same issues that create violent situations for women and children are the same situations that create violence in animals. You know, lack of control, lack of self-esteem, anger management, financial problems, drugs and alcohol.
All of the above. So there's a program in California that, and I think there's some in England as well.
Yeah, there are more than one in the United States too. I mean, there are quite a few in the United States now, but it's still not very common. And I actually read about it in People magazine, in my
Did
guilty
you?
pleasures, yes. She was one of the heroes among us they featured, and a woman, Christine Hartline is her name, and she works in San Diego with the Rancho Humane Society, and she has an animal safe house program. And it started as a foster network for the pets of women who are in domestic violence situations, who are in shelter or in transition or trying to seek shelter and safety. And so she just started putting together an informal network of foster homes, and then she ended up linking with the Humane Society, and now they have a whole segment of the Humane Society that is for the Animal Safe House. And so women who go to shelter or seek shelter are referred to the Animal Safe House program if they need it, and generally the victim advocate will contact the Safe House program, who then identifies an appropriate foster for the animal. And they will foster up to 3 months. Because most shelters, well, we do have one, the Humane Society in Melbourne here has a a couple crates that they can take the animals of women who are in Serene Harbor domestic violence shelter, but they only take them up to 2 weeks. And for a woman in transition from domestic violence, 2 weeks.
2 weeks is a blink of an eye.
It's not going to really accomplish anything. So we would like to have a network that can provide longer term care for women who need it, and eventually develop a fund and a foundation for medical care, for pet deposits, because the transition, I mean, it's things you just don't think about, but it's very important for families who have gone through such trauma to stay as a unit, and for many people, an animal is a part of that unit. And if you have children, that's also it can help them go through the healing process and recover. And so, I mean, it's going to save the animal, but it could also help with the healing process for the family if they can, keep their family together.
I had read that also some of these programs can actually help the women find housing that will take their animals with them.
That's something else, is to create a resource guide of pet-friendly apartments, pet-friendly housing, act as advocates for the women, contact the apartment and work with them on maybe reducing the pet deposit or paying for the pet deposit. And we're hoping to, well, I say we, but it's really me right now. I'm hoping to link up with, I'm going to link up with many partners in the community, and I'm already working with the local shelters, Salvation Army and Serene Harbor Domestic Violence Shelters, and then SPCA of North Brevard and the Humane Society of South Brevard. I'm hoping to piggyback on their screening process for fosters, maybe utilize some of their fosters. Right now, I'm in very early stages. I'm presenting it to the Domestic Violence Task Force Thursday to see who wants to formally partner up, so then I can apply for grants.
Right, because just yourself, you can't really do that yet.
Right, so I need to piggyback on a nonprofit, and eventually could become a nonprofit of our own. But so right now, I'm in preliminary stages. I'm trying to identify potential fosters for women, educate the community about the link between domestic violence and animal abuse, because people don't think about that. And it is significant. And if you look at, just links between violence of any type and animal abuse, it's very prominent.
It's one of the first signs that
exactly.
somebody has a problem. A child that's abusing an animal usually grows up to abuse people.
Right.
And I would imagine being in this situation, your pet is where you get your unconditional love, is where you get your support, and a child or a woman would really need to have that animal to help heal.
It is a comfort. And for the animal the animal is also in a traumatic situation, so for the animal to go to shelter or just be placed with a family who doesn't understand the implications of domestic violence, it's also further traumatic for the animal, as well.
I had adopted a dog before this dog when I was single from the shelter, and I was actually going to do a story on the cold weather and how you can't leave your animals out because they don't really have fur coats or whatever. And there was this one dog, and she was in the back of the kennel, and she had her back to you, and she was looking over her shoulder. She had this long face. And it was a no-kill shelter at the time, but they had had her so long, and nobody wanted her because she was so shy. And she was abused and came from a home with 6 children. And I think the man had just dropped her off and threw her. She they had pedigrees, gave her the papers and everything. She was a Japanese Spitz. And I took her home that night. I was working 80 hours a week as a single woman. The last thing I needed was a dog. But it was amazing to see how long it took that dog to get over whatever she had gone through. And whenever a man with blonde hair would come into my house,
really?
my friends, 3 of my friends' husbands were tall with blonde hair, she would shake and shudder and cower. The funniest thing, when I started dating my husband, who's tall with blonde hair, she fell in love with him immediately. It was so weird.
Well, they're very intuitive. Animals are so intuitive.
But she totally dumped me and became his dog. But it was we really had to work with her. She was petrified, and turned out to be a great dog. But I could see, and I would think to myself, what else went on in that house?
Yeah, exactly. If they have that many children and the dog is abused, and we have a lot of children abusing animals as a response to their own abuse, and not knowing what to do with the anger or how to express emotion, or just trying to exert control over something. It's the pecking order in the house, and the only the only thing the child's more powerful than is the animal, and so we do see a lot of that as well.
There's so much that you have to get through and help. Just in case somebody's watching and wants to help you out, should they contact you through the university?
Yes, you can contact me at lpreston@mail.ucf.edu. If you have any resources, if you're interested in helping out with the program, mostly if you want to foster animals, if you want to help with grants, anything. I mean, we really need all the help we can get.
Have you been in contact with any of these other people that did this elsewhere?
Yes, actually, I emailed the woman from San Diego as soon as I, decided that this had to happen, that this was definitely my next mission. So I emailed her, and she wrote me right back, sent me the majority of the forms they use, everything, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel, because they really have one of the most advanced programs. I mean, I've done a lot of research on other programs, and theirs is probably the most well established. And so she's been very supportive.
She must be thrilled.
She is thrilled. And I said, you're probably being bombarded right now by emails, but she was thrilled. And I think I'm going to go out there in the near future and just kind of meet her and see how it runs. And
it's such a great idea, and we're going to be very lucky to have you do that, Dr. Preston.
Thank you very much. I can't
Thank
wait.
you again. You keep returning to visit because I beg you. One of my favorite people. We'll see you again, I'm sure.
Okay.
Thanks for
thank you very
joining
much.
us. I'm Charna Davis-Wiese. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next time on UCF Profiles.